All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session of Fireside Chat with StatusNeo. I am Nidhi and I'm your host for this evening. A bit about me: I lead customer success and delivery excellence at StatusNeo. Home for me is Delhi, India, but in my role, I get to travel the world with my StatusNeo colleagues, one of them being here as well. With this company or StatusNeo for the past 2 years, been to 6 countries and still counting. I'm really excited about today's conversation because we are diving deep into a real world story of how teams can come together to solve challenges and make life a little bit easier for developers, which is not very frequently talked about. But making life easy for developers is what eventually leads to better customer experiences. Joining me today is my co host Mufaddal, or as we call him, Mufi. He's an enterprise architect here at StatusNeo and he's been at the center of multiple complex programs for our business partners globally. Whether it's a bank in Saudi, whether it's a bank in UAE, or a bookmaker business in London, he's currently architecting a team of architects for a Fortune 500 American consumer products business. And of course, we are thrilled to have Nicholas or Nick, our guest today. Nick, welcome. Nick is an engineering leader at Mauritius Commercial Bank, where he's been instrumental in shaping how developers work and collaborate for better customer outcomes. And today we'll be talking about Nick's journey with Backstage and how the platform is being used to create a better day-to-day experiences for his team. And it's going to be a simple, candid, down-to-earth chat. We are only missing a fire, but we're still calling it a fireside chat. And I'll try to find a virtual emoji or something in the meantime. And I think we are all going to really enjoy it. I'm super excited. So, yeah, settling in. I'll have my coffee and let's get started. Mufi, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Nidhi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fireside Chat. Let me start by asking the most important question first. Tell us about yourself, Nick.
Okay, so I'm the engineering chapter lead at Mauritius Commercial Bank. I've been there for just over 5 years now. And I look after the what we call broadly capabilities. So that would be the tools, the processes, the skills that people have, the skills that people need from an engineering perspective, and then also what we call alignment. So that's aligning our teams to the industry as a whole, but also then aligning internally to what our colleagues in security or product or architecture are doing. And then at the kind of low level, aligning teams to each other. You know, it's a complex environment. It's very easy for people to disconnect, and we need to keep everyone kind of pointed in the same direction. Before coming to Mauritius, I was in South Africa, where I worked for a number of the banks there, and also did a lot of work in startups. So yeah, it's the background. 2-minute tour.
That's very interesting, Nick. We also know that you're quite active in the Backstage space, right? So that brings us to the first question which we have for you. How did you discover Backstage, and what drew you to the platform for improving developer experience at MCB?
Yeah, it seems these days that the IDPs or internal developer platforms or developer portals are very topical, but that we didn't actually go out looking for one. What happened was that we were trying to solve a number of different problems and we had different people all trying to solve different problems. So for example, our DevX survey highlighted that whilst teams have got good access to information for their own purposes, they struggle to find information in other teams. And that when they could find that information, it would maybe be in a slightly different format because it's a different team. So it's difficult to find and consume that information. And the further you get away from your own team, the harder that is. At the same time, we had this challenge of discoverability, where we're a big, complicated environment. And what we were finding is that people had an imperfect view of how things fit together. And that was impacting our operational response. So depending on who was in the room and their experiences, people might overlook certain services or not really appreciate how certain things are communicating. And then another challenge we had was we were trying to find a place to put our API information. Where we tried a number of things. Where do we put our open API docs? Are they in Confluence? Are they in Postman? We tried different things. Nothing was really working there. We were also trying to solve the challenge of how do we standardize our operational information? What we're trying to get to is a view where we can have a much lighter kind of level 2 response to incidents. But in our environment where we've got, hundreds of different systems, you can't expect a level 2 team to, pick up on and understand the domain and the specificities of each domain. So how do we standardize where are the logs? How do we initiate a restart? Who owns this service? How do we standardize some of these things? So those are some of the problems that we were trying to solve in different ways. And we started looking at it from the point of view of, well, we can't be the first. We're not unique. How are other companies and other organizations solving these challenges? And we came across Backstage. And then as the more we started getting into it, the more we started kind of the lights started coming on saying, hey, this would also help with this. So we didn't go out looking for a developer portal. But we found this in the way, and we said, right, well, what are the problems that we could try to start solving? And we were kind of the last now 6 months plus have been working through this process of, well, how do we land this, and how do we actually demonstrate the value that's being added by it?
Yeah, we definitely don't know who's the first, and we definitely don't know who's the last who's going to face the problem of standardization and discovery in the tech organization. And Backstage being that solution, right? So Backstage definitely brings a solution, but it also brings a lot of cultural shift in the organization, right? Like it's never easy to adopt to a new tool. How was your journey around that, right? What strategies did you utilize to foster buy-in?
So as excited as we all got when we started looking at it, Backstage is for naught. There's no value if people didn't use it. So it's great, but if the information in it is not up to date and no one's looking at it, it's not going to help you. So what we did was we started by spinning up a small demo, and we took it back to the people and we said, look, we've been talking about these challenges for a while. We've come across this platform that we think could at least address some of them. Took them through the demo, showed them what we'd put together, asked them what do you think? Do you think that this might move the needle? Because if the answer is an overwhelming no, well then, we're barking up the wrong tree. We should try something else. And the feedback was interesting, but I want to see it with my own data. Yes. Like I don't want to see the kind of Contoso view of the world. I want to see this with my data. I want to see what that looks like. So that was much better for us than a hard no. So we said great. So we went into like another iteration of POC. So at that point, the team now, and the team at MCB, it's 300 odd engineers, split roughly between Mauritius and other parts of the world. But now they'd seen it. They at least had some understanding of the problems that it's designed to solve and how it could go about doing it. So, excuse me. So what we started doing is kind of pulling in a smaller group of people to work on this with us and kind of and bring us on that, kind of get us to that next level of demo. So we did that and we iterated on it. So we came back with and we modeled a cross section of our organization. So from the client all the way to the back end for a couple of transaction types. And we went back to the team with, hey, this is what it looks like with our data. At that point, what we'd done is we connected it to Ops Genie, we'd connected it out to Kubernetes, we'd connected it to our documentation stores, links. So now you're starting to get this very rich, context-sensitive view, and it really started to sell that idea of Backstage as a single pane of glass. Then the lights started coming on. So, and that's the process we've been going on. It's just like, we feed back to the team, we get it through there, and I don't think we're in production at this point, but what we're doing is we're just iterating on it. And as we're moving forward, we're also understanding how to live with Backstage, right? Because it's not a straightforward, simple thing. You talked about some cultural changes, but as those were coming up, we're solving those as well. And I think that's the same approach. We'll keep on this approach for a while. Is just iterate, expand. I think it would have been it would have been really destructive if we'd said, right, we're going 100% all in Backstage, start creating YAML files, everybody. It would have been disastrous. So it's slow and steady, but the iterative approach is working for us.
Very, very interesting, Nick. I was in a very similar situation a few months ago. One such business partner, again, wanted to adopt Backstage, but then you have to decide whether you go big bang or you go small iteratively. And interestingly, we organized a town hall. All the people who were going to be impacted, essentially the entire development team, so town hall of about 120 people, and the questions that they came up in town hall was like, very nice, very fancy, but what do I do with it? So similarly, how does this help me? How does this help me despite being developers, despite being telling them all the advantages? So very interesting conversation, but then eventually it was a success story. We did this similar, very large team at StatusNeo, very similar approach, one module at a time. We build this, we roll it out, you show the benefit to rest of the teams, and then they adopt. So yeah.
It's an interesting thing with Backstage is that you can't sell people their own services, right? Because they know this stuff, they know where the docs are, they know how it works. They're like, I've seen this. Where it really starts to shine is when they need help from another team.
Yes.
And the way we're having the conversation with some of the teams is like, all those calls that you get asking about where are the docs for this, how do I do this, how do I consume this, where's the open API?
Yes.
Model it in Backstage and people will find it and they'll go that way. And then all of that noise and things that are distracting you and taking your time and driving context switching, that goes away because people can now self-service. They can find the open API doc, they can find your development documentation, they can see if the service is up, they can see what namespaces it's deployed in. So whereas, so if we were just saying, hey, look how cool your services look, they were like, yeah, well, we know our services are cool. So that's been interesting. So one of the kind of POCs within the POC we're driving at the moment is kind of, how do we create this self-service portal for some of the services? We're busy building some really cool reusable components around identity management and verification that lots of our teams can benefit from, but the team that's built it is really busy and they don't want to necessarily be having to help, or they don't have the time. There's plenty of willingness, but they don't necessarily have the time to help each of these teams. So this is a great way of surfacing that.
This reminds me of that image. There is this very famous meme on the internet, right? Someone is busy building, trying to pull a cart, and there are people who are trying to give them a wheel. Hey, take this, it will make you move faster. But no, we are too busy dragging.
Yeah. Even though we are at a podcast over here, but I'm taking down notes what Nick you're sharing and even what Nidhi you're sharing, because so we have developed Backstage at multiple places, at StatusNeo, and 3 to 4 instances have been hands-on over there. But the problem which we're discussing, right, that adoption is something which is catered to that specific client. And we do our own customizations and unique requirements, right? So, Nick, how have you customized Backstage to meet the requirements of your organization and its developers while maintaining its core benefits? Because you don't want to deviate too much and lose the core Backstage, but you want to also cater to the organization you're building Backstage for. So how has your experience been around that?
So we've getting it running in a corporate environment that's running in a high security environment was not trivial. And I think with Backstage in general, you've got to be aware that this is not an off-the-shelf thing that you can spin up a container, it'll work. There is some assembly required, to put it mildly. Generally, though, we've been using things out of the box, but every organization, the combination of what are you using is a little bit different. But I mean, to this point, we've integrated with Azure for identity, Prometheus, Grafana. We're busy with Argo CD at the moment. We've got Kubernetes running, Ops Genies in there. So we've managed to get all of that done very, very easily. The things that we have where we've built customizations are largely on top of the scaffolding system, the templating system. And again, one of those, when we first started looking at Backstage, we thought, we're not going to really use this. We're not creating new services all the time. But the more we got into it, the more we realized that it's not just about templating out a service. It's about, well, this is a place for engineers to self-service just about anything. So we've built a number of extensions to help us automate common developer tasks. So one of the things we've got at the moment is a program to centralize all of our Azure DevOps instances. For reasons, we have too many. We need to get it down to at least one, well, preferably one. But the question then is, well, how do we do this and prevent the problems of the past? How do we make sure naming standards are there, structures there, etc.? And then, having worked with Backstage, we're like, wait a second. So we've built a template where anyone who needs a new project fills in a form in Backstage, clicks a button, and their project is delivered for them, properly configured with everything that they need that's sitting there. We've also built templates for services as well, because much as we didn't think we'll be building a lot of them, if you need a new Angular project, you need a new Spring Boot project, you click a button, it's there, it's with all the hooks and set up. And then the last one we've built recently is a template for actually initializing Backstage on an existing project. So go through, put in the address to your repo, fill in the form, set up your Opsgenie key, your Kubernetes descriptor, etc. Click a button, and you get a pull request. So those are some of the things we've been using. So that's really where the customizations have gone in around enabling things like that. The bulk of the code we've had to write has been around the integration with Azure DevOps. Which is, it's not as well supported as GitHub, etc. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to contribute this back to the project at some point. But the extension model is very, very clear and clean about how to do these things. You don't feel like you're going to do something you're going to have to drag this thing forward every time there's an upgrade. So I'm not too nervous about the customizations that we've built, and I think we'd be pretty comfortable building a backend plugin from scratch without too much worry. We also haven't done too much on customizing the front end in terms of look and feel, etc. We are actually working though on, that'll be next. We're actually working on branding for our Backstage instance. So we saw that American Airlines is called theirs Runway. So we thought, Backstage is very Spotify. So we've come up with the idea of Vault for MCB because, we're a bank. So we're working on that. So I think that'll be the next set of customizations we do to make it look more us.
Sounds awesome, right? Like, scaffolding is definitely one thing, right? Where it gives so many options of how companies can use scaffolding. The extensions what Backstage natively provides can give you your own product within Backstage, within your branded Backstage, right? And again, I think Azure DevOps, when it started out, most of the Backstage plugins were not even supporting Azure DevOps natively, but there has been some traction around that. And I think if you contribute a plugin for Azure DevOps, that would definitely get, I think, 10,000 downloads in the first initial 2-3 months, I guess, because that's definitely something which the community wants. And branding is also, I think it's very important, right? That like how American Airlines did that. Now everybody has understood one thing, that you have Backstage, but you brand it with a proper keyword, and that helps in adoption as well. But then it also gives a nice feeling towards your product.
Yeah. We build a kind of brand and an idea around it, because the vision for us is that we want this to be, this is your starting point for anything. This is your entry point for software engineers. You go here. And you try to find it, and we're looking at some of the other plugins that will, I think, further reinforce that idea.
Yep. Talking about plugins and features, which is your favorite Backstage plugin or a feature?
Initially it was the Kubernetes plugin, right?
Yeah.
Because often when we're debugging and the way we're structured is that you would need to log in and out of multiple Kubernetes namespaces. And with the ability to model your services in terms of the dependencies, if you were trying to debug something with Backstage, you can fly through without compromising security. We can fly through multiple namespaces. You can see, right, this pod, it's up, no problem. It's calling this pod, and you can trace through. And that is so much faster as opposed to having to, if we were all on a call, bouncing back and forth between multiple engineers. Oh, who's got access to that namespace? I don't, get someone on a call. So that was the initial, that would have might be my initial kind of killer feature, was that view. We've just finished now very short POCs on the Soundcheck plugin and the Skills Exchange plugin, which we're super excited about. And again, it's the Skills Exchange, which allows you to basically manage skills at an individual level, mentoring at an individual level. It's something we spend a lot of time on, because with the number of consultants we've got, the amount of flux in our environment, we need to keep an eye on this so we can make sure that like training needs are well understood. And this was something we were going to build, and then we found out that it's already been built. It's in the platform. So that's been great. We're busy looking at that at the moment. And then Soundcheck, which is the module that allows you to build a kind of template to assess your services in terms of, you can build a policy and a set of checks around code coverage and basic, source code management, etc. But then to have this view across all of your services, all of your teams. And so you can spot where we might have compliance issues, where we maybe need to do some training, where we need to got some tech debt building up, is fantastic. And when you're doing engineering at scale, it's getting those views is so much harder, right? If you're talking about one team, one Azure DevOps organization, a couple of repos, I can go in, I can run reports. I can write some tooling to scrape the Git log. For us, it's hundreds of repos, 30 plus teams, 300 engineers. How do you do this without having to go and manually inspect? And Soundcheck has proved to be a really good solution for that, we think. So those are the ones we're really excited about at the moment.
When you are talking about the size or the volume of people that are using it, what I am thinking is that you're a bank, right? In my conversations with very senior leaders, or let's say the IT teams of banks, the first question that I always encounter is that, is it open source? The moment you say, oh yes, it is open source, the conversation kind of takes a different direction. In your experience, how did you strategize around it? The IT departments, the guidelines, the too many regulators, the different rules in every country, in every geography when it comes to regulation of banking. Many or most of them do not allow open source tools, right? Is that something that you faced and that you had to solve for?
Not specifically open source, but I mean, my preference is to, wherever possible, would be to use open source software and even if there's a paid option, use the open source flavor of it. So we're a Red Hat shop. We run OpenShift. We love Red Hat. We work very, very closely with them. They have an instance of Backstage. We don't use it. And we don't use it because we would rather understand what is the delta between the base open source offering and what Red Hat can give us through theirs. So that's the way we look at it. So it's kind of, we'll upgrade to some of the thing once the open source version does not work for us. And the reason why that preference is because it's open source. We need to move quickly. If we run into a problem, we need to be able to look at this code and understand it. And preferably have a community behind it. And the community in Backstage is very, very strong. The speed that this thing has picked up over the last couple of years, and the depth of your community, it gives you that sense of confidence. So from a strategy point of view, there's lots of IDP vendors out there. I was at the SRE Con in Dublin a couple of weeks ago, chatted to a lot of the guys, some amazing products, etc. But we're building through Backstage until such times as maybe we outgrow it or we can really understand the value. In terms of running open source software in a banking environment, from my point of view, it's easier. Like if I think of some of the problems we've had with closed source software, because the closed source software has been built in a way that does not appreciate the requirements of a bank. Simple things like, how do you manage certificates? Can you support self-signed certificates in a secure way? Can we have access to the search chains? Can we change these things? And on many the closed source guys, they don't think of it that way. They're just thinking, oh, you can run it as a container in root in your environment, it'll be fine. So when we bring open source software, when we bring any software in, it's got to pass. The standard is the same. right? So you've got to get through the container, you've got to get through container scans, security scans, you've got to make sure you're working with our certificates, you've got to get, I had to get our security team to sign off on some of the open ID stuff we wanted to use for authentication. So it's no different from us whether it's open source or not. And we look at it on a case-by-case basis, but overwhelmingly my preference is for, if I can get away with it, open source it, because we like to be able to see what it does and can we change it.
Interesting. I'm going to quote these reasons next time I come across a situation, because it comes up very, very frequently. Moving back to you.
Yeah, so there's this inherent thing. It's like, oh, it's open source, it's maybe less secure, and I don't think that holds.
That is exactly what innovative leaders think, right, Nick? So happy that you put it in a beautiful way. That is how, the tech leaders' innovations happen. That you let the team develop things, get the best thing out, have the courage to pick out the best tools, build it, package it, and then let your CISOs, InfoSec, AppSec teams do the drilling on top of that, right? But there should be a lot of innovation thinking out in the market if you want to deliver the technological excellence. So well said, Nick. Whenever we are talking about Backstage, right, we want to deliver value not just for the developers, but also for the tech leads and even for the chiefs and CXOs who want to take some interest in the technological landscape. And Backstage becomes an excellent tool for that. Backstage helps different team members in a tech team in unique ways. How does it benefit a developer, a tech lead, and a chief differently? Can you share the key outcomes for each of them which they would get from Backstage if they are utilizing?
So I think for anyone in the engineering space, it's about discoverability. So it's about this being able to discover those services and then kind of navigate that landscape, uncover the dependencies, right? So you can navigate through Backstage and kind of discover how services interact and then drill straight from there into the source code, and which is far faster than trying to do it via email, or maybe even if it's well documented in Confluence. I think for tech leads, it's a great way of creating an aggregated view of how all your services are running. So how are they all fitting together, and be quickly jumping in. You're hearing there's a problem on some service, quickly you can jump in, check the status of what it's looking like in Kubernetes. Is it looking healthy? You can surface administrative functions. You can check and see, do I have a failing build? It's that kind of single pane of glass, and it kind of works at different levels. As you start moving away from the kind of engineering, it's where we're finding our kind of stakeholders in the next kind of level more interested in. It's about ownership. It's in a big organization, and we're not massive by global standards, but it's like, who do I talk to about X? And then there's emails flying everywhere and everyone's busy and no one's reading their emails. Whereas with Backstage, you can go in, you can search for payment service and get into it and go, okay, well, there's the team that looks after it. Like, let's chat with them. So that discoverability of not just services, but now people. And then when you overlay skills exchange on that, you can find teams with particular skills. So it's that access to information, this single pane of glass. Where we found a value proposition, like outside of engineering entirely, is for our colleagues in architecture. Is we've been having this discussion for the last couple of years about, well, where should the design information sit? And we use Orbis as our enterprise architecture tool. But the question we've been struggling with is, how much information do we put in Orbis, and when is it too much? And we've been back and forth on this. And when we showed them Backstage, they were like, well, that answers the question. Is all we want to do is at a certain level of granularity, we'll put a link from our logical implementation of this service in Orbis down into Backstage. So Orbis has got the logical view and the link into the business strategy from it, like, TOGAF kind of view. And then when you want to understand how was this implemented, who owns it, where's the source code, what does its pipeline look like, into Backstage. And that was one of those like job done, very, very quick conversations. And I think we're chatting also with our colleagues now in QA, because they've got they're wanting to be able to pull in information, for example, from Sonar into their QA reports. And the challenge they're facing is, okay, well, how do I get access to the Sonar report for this particular service without having to go into the pipeline, see how it was configured, check the project key. And again, Backstage for our QA colleagues answers that question, and Soundcheck makes it that much easier, because you can literally just click through and see, okay, well, there's the latest code coverage, there's the latest security report, etc.
Yep, it's a twin of enterprise knowledge is what I believe, right? So navigating knowledge sources is never linear like we assume documents to be, but with Backstage it's like how our human minds work. So enterprise knowledge, twin of it, yeah.
And Backstage suffers from the same challenges as you would have with any documentation that's not directly based on the source code. But what I found with it is that it makes it very, very easy to see when something is not properly configured. It's immediately obvious, like something's gone wrong, because none of the panels have information on it, or it's throwing errors at you. But also you can lint it. So because it's YAML, because it's in your source code, you can actually write something to go through and check. You know, you can write a bot to go through and find me repos that don't have a component info. You can actually interrogate this thing. So you've still got to maintain it. It's still got to be right. But what we're finding is that it's very easy to see when something's wrong. Whereas a standalone Confluence page might be up to date, might not be, might be accurate, might not be. Just depends. It's much closer to, because it's closer to the code. I think it's a little bit easier to keep in sync.
And that's how you complete a software development lifecycle, or should I say, secured software development lifecycle? I will say the StatusNeo. Yeah, you touched upon, the Backstage community and how responsive that is, right? And over the years, in a very short time, there has been around 1,500 plus contributors. This number may sound a little small at first, but if you see that it's a very niche space, and 1,500 contributors mean a lot to the project, and that's how it has been growing so much. So what has your experience been with the Backstage community? Any particular example you would like to highlight where it was a great help for you?
So I think it's the depth in the community that's been generated in a short space of time. And we've wanted for nothing. And literally every single thing that we've wanted to integrate, it's already been there. It's, so OpsGenie, like that's there. Azure DevOps, there. Kubernetes, Grafana, Prometheus, it's all there. So we've not had to invest significantly in building plugins for what we need to enable what we need. And unless we start getting really esoteric, I can't see that we would. Has it always been the easiest thing in the world? No. But at least half of that was because we were on for a while. We were on the old backend system, and we just finished our upgrade. And that, like in retrospect, we should have just done the upgrade sooner. Sunk cost fallacy at work on that one. But since we've upgraded, it's just been so much easier. But again, then when you do get stuck on something, there's normally a thread, a discussion. You can raise an issue, you can have a chat. They'll point you in the right direction as to how do you figure this out. So much as there is some assembly required, you're not completely on your own. There is a huge community and a huge body of knowledge out there that will support you in doing this.
Yeah, absolutely right. Like, is centering a div in the center of a frame the easiest thing? No, it's not. But you can get some help on Stack Overflow, ChatGPT maybe, and you'll get through that. Similarly, Backstage has been that, right? Our experience has been similar. Like when we started out, there were less number of contributors. We were seeking help, but within 2 years, I would say that we started helping out many other developers on the community space. A lot of folks from StatusNeo have been active contributors, we answer them questions actively, even on the Discord channel, which they have. So that has been it, right? And it's a fun community, so we love to participate and have fun over there. So what advice would you give to other organizations considering adopting Backstage? Like what key factors they should consider before they're starting out?
I think Um, you need to keep in mind that this is not something you're just going to turn on, right? So you need to make sure that you've got the people available to invest in it. This is not get a couple of guys, spin this thing up and we'll try it, right? So that some assembly required, keep that in mind. You do not, like, we're not a React shop. We're more on the Angular side, but you need to know a little bit of React. You need to know Kubernetes. You need to know JavaScript. You need to know it. You don't need to be an expert in it, but you need to be comfortable with those things. If you're not, I think you would find it very, very hard. Not because it's overly complicated, but you're trying to overcome that learning curve around the base technologies before you even get into it. So keep that in mind. If that's too much, then what I would suggest is try one of the hosted ones. Try Rody or try one of the other IDPs or the Red Hat, the Janus portal. Try one of those. But if you've got the base skills, then by all means give it a try. I mean, our first POC was like 2 weeks with like 2 people to get something up. It was very basic, but it was enough to let us know, hey, this could help us. So that would be the first thing, is just be aware that this is not something you just put in and leave it alone. It's going to take effort, right? And I was chatting with one of the guys at SRECon, and he was saying in his environment that kind of the challenge they got is that they got to the point where the amount of effort that they were putting in was a lot higher than they thought. But it was, I think in that case, I think there was some challenges around custom plugins, etc. It sounded very complicated. So you need to keep that in mind. Secondly, I think the iterative approach and figuring it out as you go and taking the feedback from the engineers is critical. Not just like in terms of like getting everyone on board and demonstrating the value, but as we've been doing this, we've learned so much about how to just structure the modeling. Like, how do we describe the relationships between things? What are our standards for actually capturing this information? So yes, you can bang everything into one big YAML file. No, you probably shouldn't. But you can go too far the other way and make it too granular. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's about your environment, what makes sense. But if you go big bang and you're creating thousands of YAML files, fixing that is, people will just chuck it out, and then it's too much, it's too hard, it's too much friction. So little things like that. Also, are we getting people to manually register with Backstage, or are we using auto discovery? If you're using auto discovery, how exactly will that work? Those type of things. So you've got to kind of work through that, do some modeling, see how it works, do the next bit, enable features, and build it out. But this is a journey that we're on. And then lastly, analytics. Get the analytics. It's got Google Analytics support out of the box. Turn it on. Because at the end of the day, if people aren't looking at the stuff ever, you're wasting your time, you're wasting resources. There's that. But more likely, what pages are they looking at?
Yeah.
Right. So for us, we can see the traffic to the Open API pages. Like we're seeing like not so much traffic to some of the other plugins, but we can see that. And that will then guide you in terms of, well, where do we invest next, right? If we're trying to do a big drive to push up our Backstage adoption, it shouldn't just be adopt Backstage. It should be like, what aspects, right? We want to make sure all of our Open API stuff is in there, all of our Kubernetes stuff is in there, and the analytics will guide you.
Absolutely, Nick. Right? Like we can get the technological excellence, but to create an excellent product, we are nothing without measuring what we have done, right? And that's critical. That's absolutely critical. Well, that brings us to the end of today's Fireside Chat. Nick, thank you so much for sharing your journey and insights with us. It's been incredibly inspiring. To everyone who joined us, we hope you found this conversation as engaging and valuable as we did. These sessions are all about learning from real experiences. And Nick has certainly given us a lot to think about.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you again.
Pleasure, guys.
Thank you, Mufi.
Thanks for the chat. That was a lot of fun.
Yes. And until next time, this is what we say at StatusNeo: aspire, inspire, motivate, and we'll see you in the next Fireside Chat. Thank you.
Cheers.